yesterday's news.
Hello, welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the papers of yesterday. The Bishop's vote. Well, that's been back in the news of late, hasn't it? It seems to have been a long-running saga, which might be approaching its end, although already I've heard suggestions that it might not happen or indeed be overturned before it had started. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Who knows? Suffice to say, we seem to have spent a lot of time debating it. And I thought perhaps putting Bishop's vote into a search engine to look back in the headlines and papers of yesteryear might be an interesting exercise. And it brings up a few issues with regard to the Bishop and indeed voting on various topics. The Manx Sun, perhaps, Saturday, April the 20th of 1889. Insular Legislature is the title of the column. Tynwald Court, Friday, April the 5th, 1889. In the Tynwald Court today, after the Lieutenant Governor had made his statement as to insular finance, which was fully reported last week, the following business was taken, namely the education vote. Where is the Lord Bishop? A reminder from Deemster Drinkwater. The Archdeacon moved that a sum not exceeding £7,815, an awful lot of money in 1899, I would have thought, be applied from the general revenue of this island for the purpose of public education for 1 year from the first day of April 1889. He said the absence of the Lord Bishop, who had asked him to express his regret at not being able to move that resolution, was owing to public duty elsewhere. He was sorry the amount the Education Board had to ask for was larger than on any previous occasion, but that would be explained by the estimate of expenditure which had been issued as well as by what had fallen from His Excellency that morning. Mr. Fisher seconded the motion. Deemster Drinkwater went on, I rise in consequence of an expression made use of by the Archdeacon that he regretted having to move this resolution because the Lord Bishop, who was chairman of the board, was absent on public duty. I take it for granted, of course, that he is absent with the leave of His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor, because we have it to bear in mind that the Lord Bishop, like other officials, is paid by this island. Hear, hear, was sounded. That his first duty is to this island, hear, hear, and that I know of no higher duty than that of appearing in this court to defend the conduct of the Education Board on questions connected with the education of the country. Hear, hear, once again was heard. Mr. Lawton said to me, it is a matter of regret not to find his lordship taking his proper place in this court. Hear, hear. I know that an unfortunate observation was made by an indiscreet member who is now absent, the member for Ramsey, Mr. Cowell, when he congratulated his lordship on being so seldom present to do his duty to the country in this court. Oh dear. I don't remember the exact words, but he congratulated his lordship upon so seldom appearing in this court, and would rather he was attending to his spiritual duties as Lord Bishop of Soder and Man. I regret his lordship does not take his position in this court to watch the laws that are passed for the government of the people and for their moral and material advancement, and I think he might possibly be making himself more useful in that capacity than in the very useful subsidiary purpose of taking the chair at either temperance meetings or social tea parties. I don't quite understand the nature of the resolution we're being asked to pass. I know nothing about it, although probably it may be a wise expenditure. All I object to is not being consulted upon it, and I'm not going to be a party to voting a sum of money which I know nothing about. Unless I have an explanation, I shall vote to have it postponed until we get the details investigated and see whether they are right. The Bishop being castigated there for not attending when he should have been because he was going for more spiritual duties. An interesting paradox. The Ramsey Courier, Friday, March the 11th, 1932, we're skipping forward to now. Stormy scene at church conference, we're told. The Bishop's stipend, vote of censure on authors of circular to legislatures. Canon Quine and Rector Neil accept responsibility. The diocesan conference was held in All Saints Hall, Douglas, on Wednesday, the Lord Bishop presiding. Before the routine business of the conference, Canon R.D. Kermode rose and moved the suspension of the standing orders in order to take the following resolution, that the conference records its deep sense of indignation at the sending of an anonymous circular to members of the House of Keys on the Bishop's Temporalities Bill. which was unanimously approved by the conference at its last sitting and conveys its respectful sympathy to the Lord Bishop in the wholly unwarranted attack on his lordship. Must be getting used to it by now, the Bishop. Lieutenant Commander Parks and Mr. B. Kelly seconded the motion to suspend the standing orders. The President asked for at least 60 members to show their approval, and after this had been done, Canon Kermode proceeded to move his resolution. He said that there appeared in the press last week a copy of the anonymous circular. In that egregious communication, there was a very carefully woven tissue of half-truths. There was scarcely anything in it that was false, yet there was nothing in it which told the whole truth. There was an old saying, very old, suppressio veri suggestio falsi, which meant that a suppression of the truth is the suggestion of a falsehood. The whole object of the document was to deceive and lead astray any members of the legislature who might not be acquainted with the facts or church affairs. He would not go through all of it, but would break it down into parts, he said. Stormy scenes indeed. We go a year or two further forward, 1934, Friday, November the 23rd, in the Isle of Man Examiner. Sunday drinking. We're back to temperance again, I think, to a degree. Mr. J.F. Crellin sacrifices the bishop's vote. I'm on the side of temperance. Mr. T.H. Neen. Messrs. J.F. Crellin and T.H. Neen, we are told, Michael's representatives in the last House of Keys, have to face a contest next Wednesday owing to the intervention of Mr. Charlie Gill of Ballaugh, who was acquitted of housebreaking and stealing at General Jail last week. On Tuesday, Messrs. Crellin and Neen addressed a meeting in the Ballaugh Church Hall, and in the course of a masterly review of the Keys' activities during the past 5 years, Mr. Crellin explained in detail his opposition to the electricity bill, remarking that if a deficiency rate had to be levied, it would probably be a substantial one, and would be levied on all householders in the area concerned, whether they had a supply or not. Mr. Crellin advocated something a bit better than Ronald's Way in connection with the aerodrome issue, and speaking of his work on the local government board, he said that the more they could do in getting good water and drainage systems, the more would they attract residents to the island. Mr. Neen made a strong point of redistribution, and in doing so he had a tilt at his principal advocate. Mr. Norris is very hot about it, he said, and he is talking of walking out of the house if he doesn't get it, but I doubt if he will get the others to follow him, although I don't know if he would be very much missed if he did go. Oh, gosh me. Fighting talk indeed from Mr. Neen there. He alleged that since Mr. Norris had returned to the House, town versus country had been brought into issue once again, although they should all work for the whole island with the balance of power remaining in the country. Question time lasted over 1.5 hours, and among the many answers given was one in favour of a deposit being made when a candidate for the Keys was nominated. On the question of payment of criminal juries, Mr. Crellin said he would be in favour of abolishing juries as far as possible, except in cases of murder and manslaughter. The chairman, Mr. F. Crowe CP, asked the candidate's views on the manifesto of the clergy. Mr. Crellin said he realised he was going to lose the vote of the Lord Bishop and possibly the Reverend Hemingway, as since that manifesto had been published, they could not vote for him. 6 years ago, said Mr. Crellin, he sat on a commission which dealt with licensing and the Shop Hours Act, and they reported in favour of a man being allowed to have a drink with a meal on the Sabbath. He was still in favour of that, and that was as far as he would go in the matter of facilities. Mr. Neen said, I'm on the side of temperance, and I voted on the side of temperance. I cannot support any further facilities. In the Ramsey Courier, Friday, May the 28th, 1943, legal status for tombolas. Deemster Cowley's new clause adopted. The bishop's opposition. The governor uses casting vote. It's one of those illogical things that English people seem to delight in, said the Attorney General in the Legislative Council on Tuesday when the Gaming and Betting Bill was being further considered. He was referring to the fact that though it declared in the bill that all lotteries are unlawful, it then makes all kinds of exceptions. It was absolutely farcical, he said, from a logical point of view, but they were legislating for an illogical people who did extraordinary things. Mr. F.S. Dalgleish asked whether an auction would not obviate the necessity for these raffles for charitable purposes. Deemster Cowley had pointed out that but for tombolas, a good many people who subscribed in that way to charities would never subscribe in any other way. They had only to look at the subscription list of charitable objects to note that it was the same people all the time who gave. If they had auctions, it would be even worse, because somebody would have to buy the article in the end, and it would be the same people all the time. The governor, don't they get over the difficulty with these tombolas by stating on the ticket that it is a threepenny or sixpenny donation to the charity concerned, and that if it draws a prize it can be obtained for that amount? The Attorney General, I think the courts would soon sweep that away and get to the substance of the transaction. That could never be a defence. No, I don't think it could. Wrong in principle, we're told. The Lord Bishop said that if betting was wrong in principle, it did not matter whether one took a small instance of it or a large instance. The principle applied equally. They were confronted in the church when they tried to condemn the principle of gambling by people turning around and saying, "You allow raffles at church bazaars? Isn't the principle the same?" Of course it was the same. True, the evil was not so obvious because there was not the excess. But they were admitting the principle and could have no grounds ultimately for condemning betting and gambling for bigger stakes. After all, excess was purely a relative matter. What was a little for one man was too much for another, and they could not make hard and fast rules as to the amount that should be allowed. If they allowed the right of raffles and lotteries at bazaars, then it seemed to him they were only confusing the public when they said that all lotteries were unlawful. He also drew issue with the Deemster when he compared betting with drink. They did not say that the sale of all alcoholic liquor was unlawful, but they did say that all lotteries were unlawful. You could not put them side by side. He would be prepared to admit that it was the excess in alcohol drinking that was bad, but in betting and gambling he would say that the whole practice of it was wrong, and they could not make the distinction between a little being harmless and much being harmful. Strong words. Incredible to think, isn't it? 1940, that was, 1943, and lotteries and such like still illegal. Keys debate Constitution today in committee, said the Daily Times of Tuesday, November the 3rd, 1959. When the House of Keys assembles today, the House will go into committee to consider the report of the McDermott Commission on the island's constitution. The observations of the Legislative Council on the Commission's recommendations will also be considered by the House. It is understood that the Legislative Council's attitude to the Commission's proposals are that the Lord Bishop should remain to vote on all matters in Tynwald. That might have changed now, of course. That the Governor should be removed completely from the Legislative Council and that the First Deemster should retain full voting powers. That both Deemsters should remain members of the Council and that 2/3 majority of a joint meeting of Council and Keys should be required to pass legislation which has previously been twice rejected by the Council, having passed the Keys. Hope you understood all that. It's understood that there is a group of opinion in the House of Keys that the House should adopt the McDermott Commission's proposals as they stand and press for their acceptance in the framework of an amended constitution. And finally, Ramsey Courier, Friday, November the 18th, 1960, back to gambling. Never mind lotteries now. Manx Casino coming. Less than, 17 years later, we've gone from thinking about lotteries to a casino coming to the Isle of Man. There's a change in public attitude. Resolution asks Governor to introduce legislation. Tynwald approves by majority vote. Tynwald on Tuesday passed a resolution asking the Governor to introduce legislation to enable a casino to be operated on the Isle of Man. The resolution was carried in the Legislative Council by 7 votes to 3. The Bishop was one of those against. The Keys, they were in majority in favour, 14-5. As for a casino, as I say, 17 years earlier, a lottery, just a lottery of some kind, and raffle were being debated. Quite a step, isn't it? And now, maybe the Bishop won't be there to vote at all. Who knows? Suffice to say, bishops and voting, certainly old news on the Isle of Man. Until next week, cheerio.
You're gonna be yesterday's news.